Right, so I want to talk a little bit about the Australian wildfires. Now, there's a two or three different aspects of this that I want to get at. The first one is the whole people blaming it on climate change. Now, not only are they wrong in that if you watch Tony Heller on YouTube, he's a guy who basically debunks the man-made climate change idea in and of itself. So make sure you go check his channel out on YouTube. He's Tony Heller. Tonyheller, I believe. So check him out. He's one of the best guys. He puts out videos pretty much every day and does a very good job of it. So check him out. And it's kind of something I want to do too, is give people that I enjoy watching shout outs, just because I know people are always looking for people that put out good stuff on YouTube, because a lot of that kind of stuff is censored nowadays. So it's pretty hard to find if you're new or you don't know a lot of people out there. So I'm going to do that. But getting back to this, the whole idea that it has anything to do with climate change is complete BS. Australia has always had wildfires, and one of the reasons why they're getting so bad, I mean, one of the reasons, because there's clearly other ones, is the government and environmental protesters. The government refuses to do it, but partially because the environmental protesters refuse to let, normal, letting or having the government, do normal, routine burns during the wet season to help prevent this kind of stuff. Because if you never do it, well, then you're going to get wildfires. And back in the day, before government had so much power, this kind of stuff happened naturally. But nowadays, because the government's so, advanced and powerful, that they can prevent this kind of stuff. So that's something that needs to be done, because that's why a lot of this stuff is happening. Um, and like I say too, the other people trying to tie it to climate change is complete BS, because like I said, Australia, and if you watch Tony Heller, you would have learned this kind of stuff. And I mean, it's just normal logical thinking. Australia has always had wildfires. I believe Australia, get this, I think it was in the 1800s, the mid 1800s, they had their worst flooding and their worst year for wildfires, other than maybe now, but I mean, a lot of this is man-made, literally within the same year. That's just how crazy things were back in the day. So yeah, the idea that it has anything to do with climate change, and again too, the other thing I would bring up is that this is just another thorn in the side of the climate change believers. Because if climate change was a real thing, and a real thing that we had to worry about, then they wouldn't have to point to examples that clearly aren't climate change, that are clearly complete BS, to justify their theories and to justify their beliefs. Like, if I think that, let's say, let's just say climate change, isn't real, and I was pointing towards, this exact stuff on, let's just say that the wildfires were a result of climate change, and I was pointing that kind of stuff out in the reverse. Well, then, like, I'd be lying to you, right? Because if it's a real theory, and there's logic and there's reason behind it, then they shouldn't have to lie. They shouldn't have to make stuff up. So if climate change is real, then there's absolutely no reason that they should be blaming this kind of stuff on climate change. Because if it's real, you should have no shortage of examples to point to back up your theory, basically, if that makes sense. The other thing to point out too is that I don't know what the exact number is. I've heard 180. I've heard around 200. I've heard, just over 200. I imagine the number's going up pretty much by the day. But a lot of people have been arrested, and that again just goes completely in the face of it being climate change. I would say that there are a portion of three different groups of people, and two of them I want to talk about specifically. Number one is just people who do it through, maybe it's incompetence or on accident or partially on accident. These are the kind of people that, maybe they're having campfires or this kind of stuff and don't put them out properly. Maybe they throw out a lit cigarette and make sure that it's still going, and it, starts a fire. That kind of stuff can happen. All that's the first group of people. Second group of people is the environmentalists that want to back, like I say, they don't have much reason and logic and evidence behind their theory, so they're just gonna, cheat basically and start fires. And I think that's a decent amount of them. The third group is what you see here, is what I have pulled up, is the immigrants that I don't know the best way of putting it. The best way of putting it probably just is they have contempt for Western, or specifically white society. more not completely free market, but more free market countries that have more freedoms, and they're going to screw with us for the lightest way I can put it. And that's what we have here too. Most of the people, I'm not sure how they got this, but everybody up until this point, these are the first people that I've seen their names and pictures published. These are the first people. So my inclination is that if these, let's just say these were some far right group, some white nationalist or hardcore like militia group or something that the left would be able to point to as far right, even whether regardless of whether they are. Do you honestly think that the media wouldn't be publishing names and pictures and this kind of stuff? Like, what if they're literally all white people, like just all 200 of them, all white people and all right wingers? Like, do you honestly think that the media wouldn't be publishing their names? Like, I would bet every dollar I have that they would. I would guarantee it. So I think that it's not 100% proof. I'll admit I could be wrong on this kind of stuff, but I mean stuff like this kind of shows evidence towards the contrary, that these are largely, I would say, roughly spread even between just people that are either accidentally or did stupid things like flicking cigarette butts out, the environmental activists, and the Muslim or African immigrants. And the thing that one of these guys laughed as he was leaving court, I think that just kind of proves my theory that these are just people that have contempt for Western society, that their country's effed up, for lack of a better way of putting it. So because they're mad about that, we're gonna come do it to Western countries basically. And you've had ISIS and a lot of these other groups say tell their members, yeah, start fires. I mean, they burn down churches all the time. Like, what's the difference between burning down a bunch of the forests? Like, so I don't want to talk too much about this video, but basically the main 2 points being is that this has nothing to do with climate change. Like, come on. Like I say, Tony Heller's completely debunked that. Australia has always had wildfires, and given the fact that the government and environmental protesters refuse to let the government do routine burns to limit the ability for this kind of stuff to happen, it's inevitable that you're going to get massive fires. And when you have these crazed environmental activists that, like I say, they are crazed, they're absolutely insane. At least not all of them, obviously, but a lot of them, they take their politics so seriously that it's like a religion to them. And this kind of stuff is inevitable. And then the third aspects, like I say, the immigrants, and like I say, obviously it's not all of them. People are going to jump on me. So, oh, you think it's all of them? No, I think it's a minority. But even when it's a minority, like, I mean, a very small percentage of whites are racist, or right wingers are racist, but yet the left still takes if 1% of them are, the left still takes it as evidence to smear them all, even though a quarter of Muslims believe in Sharia law. I think it might even be more than that. But like, are you telling me that if a quarter of whites or of white right wingers were racist, that the left wouldn't take that as evidence to declare right wingers as terrorists? Like, of course they would. So let's stop pretending that this kind of stuff isn't the case. So yeah, like, yeah, basically to sum it up, climate change, nothing to do with it. This is a result of, number one, the government's ineptitude. Like I say, whenever you let the government run anything, it's horrible, because they have no incentive to do a good job. Because if they do a good job, then people will realize, hey, we don't need the government to fix this kind of stuff. We can do it on our own. So that, like I say, that's why the government wants so much power, and the government doesn't ever actually fix things, because if they actually fix things, then people could be like, hey, the problem's fixed, we don't need the government anymore. So that's why they never fix things, because the more the problem exists, the more they can indoctrinate people as saying, hey, that's because we didn't spend enough money, that's because you didn't give us enough power. And the people are dumb enough to go along with it, partially because of indoctrination, and they give them more power, they give them more money, and the cycle continues. So I'll leave the video there. If you liked it, make sure to hit that like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more.